All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking some time this morning to join us here. Uh, Get my two screens going here. So we have a pretty straightforward agenda today. We're going to go over kind of some of the business items first, so getting through our minutes and then talking about bioassessment, both kind of where we're at from our first round of sampling and where things are at getting started again this year. We have Hillary Yance from Tetra Tech today to talk about where we're at with our NARP strategy development for the main stem portion of the Des Plaines River. A little bit on TLWQS with some of the deadlines coming up, and then just going over the outreach materials that we have for summer. So if there are any questions about the minutes that I sent out, if you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand, either way. If there are no questions about the meeting minutes, if I can get a motion to approve the minutes as they were distributed. You can raise your hand or unmute yourself and just make the motion. I got Blaine Klein and a second. And Amy Hanneran. Okay, we'll just make my notes. We'll launch our poll. Go ahead and click your answer, hit submit, and we'll be set. It looks like we got most everybody, so the motion carried. Thank you. So just a little bit of review from our round one bioassessments. We talked a little bit about this at the annual meeting. Our bioassessments are done over a 5-year period. We sample years 1 through 4, and we have a year off. And we normally would sample the first year, the lower portion of the main stem, second year, the middle or the upper portion of the main stem and some tributaries way up north. Third year, Hickory Creek watershed, and the fourth year, all of the other remaining tributaries. We had a very high water year in 19, so we had to suspend sampling, and we redid some sampling in 2020. So that kind of stretched over 3 years instead of 2, and we were combining and doing a single report for the main stem, to have all of the data for the main stem all in one place. So that report got pushed back because of that extension in sampling. So I have both the first drafts of the main stem report and the Hickory Creek report that I'm reviewing currently. We'll get back some comments back to IEP or back to Midwest Biodiversity Institute, and I'll kind of have a final draft to share with the rest of the membership. So that'll be something we'll be wrapping up here over the summer. And then we expect to get the last report for the remaining tributaries sometime in the fall. So they're working on that right now. And then as we kind of get into field season, some of that work gets suspended. So they're trying to get as much of that put together both prior to and sort of in between their sampling runs, the work they're doing for us and for others. So we hope to be seeing those things later in the fall. Moving on, so we're starting the first year of round 2. So for 2023, we'll be working on the main stem Des Plaines River, pretty much from the confluence with the Kankakee up to about the I-355 bridge for context. So we have 25 sites that are on the main stem. And then we have a few additional sites just to help kind of give us some context. So we have a site on the Kankakee, because where the Des Plaines and the Kankakee come together, really pretty much right at that confluence is where the Illinois River starts. And so having a little bit of data of what's coming in from the Kankakee is useful. And then we have a site at the mouth of the Ship and Sanitary Canal and a site at the mouth of the I&M Canal, as both of those come into the main stem and definitely play a role in kind of what water quality looks like downstream of those areas. So monitoring will get started later in June and run through the middle of October. The thing that's a little bit different for both this year and next year is that, going to the next slide here, Midwest Biodiversity Institute will actually do our water and sediment collection. So when we're working on the tributaries, the lab that we work with, First Environmental, will collect the water, collect and analyze the water samples. But because of where our sites are located on the main stem, generally not associated with bridges, the only way we can do that water collection is by boat. And since Midwest Biodiversity Institute has those types of resources and they're out here working on other aspects of the project as well, it made sense to have them do that collection. So that's what they did for us last time. So they'll continue to do that water collection and coordinate with the lab to just have a point where they're handing off samples and getting new empty bottles. So they will get started with that likely late June is when they'll get up here to get that work started. So when we did our budgeting when we put together our budget last December for this fiscal year, we had estimated around $207,000, almost $208,000 in the budget. I thought we had enough of an increase worked in, but I think with just lots of things after COVID, prices went up a little more than what we had expected. So what came in the proposal is about $15,000 over what we had originally budgeted. But the work, particularly within this year, next year with the main stem, all of this data collection will be an important component in the next steps for our NARP strategy. So implementing our NARP strategy in the next 5-year period for the main stem, this data collection is going to be really important into coming up with a target for phosphorus. So what we're proposing is moving $15,000 from our NARP line item in the budget to cover the increase. We've been putting funds into that NARP line item so that we have funds for implementation in the next steps for working on the NARP. So it makes sense that that's where the funds would come from. So if there are any questions, please feel free to just unmute yourself, ask questions before we kind of go on to the next step of authorizing the contract. Okay, I don't see any questions coming through. So what we're looking for is a motion to authorize staff and board to, oh, I didn't finish that on the bottom there, sorry. I will put the poll up because that's where I have the actual. So before anybody clicks on this, I just wanted you to be able to see what the motion is. So the motion to authorize staff and board to negotiate and execute a contract with Midwest Biodiversity Institute for the 2023 bioassessment on the Des Plaines River with a not to exceed $222,500. So what I need, I see a couple of people are clicking the box. That's great. But what I need is a motion and a second for that for our record. So if I can get some hands raised for a motion and second.
Motion Shanahan.
Thank you, Ed.
Second, Lockwood.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Okay, now everybody can click their boxes on the poll and vote. Okay, looks like we have everybody who is going to vote. So the motion carried with no votes. Okay, thank you. All right, so the two second pieces here is we'll be working with First Environmental Lab. So this is a different lab than who we used on the first round. We worked with Microbac last go around. We had essentially an agreement between the Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group, the Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition, DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group. We worked together on sort of a general services agreement last go around, and Microbac was the one that won that agreement. It was for like a 5-year term. So we went back out to bid earlier this year, and First Environmental came back with the best numbers cost-wise. There were a lot of cost increases post-COVID. So we knew numbers were going to go up, but First Environmental Lab had the best rates. We have a lot of members who use them and have had good work experiences with them. They're local here out of Naperville. So they were the ones that were chosen for that general services agreement. So we're working kind of in concert with the other two watershed groups to get some better kind of volume pricing. So we'll be working with First Environmental Lab throughout this whole next round of bioassessment. So rather than like a contract, really what we're approving today will be a work order. And so like I have all the numbers, we know where we're at with that one. And so that's what we budgeted was the $73,217. So what I'll be looking for is a motion to approve a work order not to exceed that budgeted amount of $73,217. So either any questions or a motion to move forward with a vote.
Shanahan will make the motion.
Okay, thanks, Ed. And I got a second from Keith McKean, New Lenox. Looks like everybody that's going to vote is in their vote. So again, motion carries with no votes. Thank you. And then the last piece of business here is we work with EPT Labs out of, I think it's Willow Springs, to do fecal coliform analysis. Basically, we had talked with First Environmental, and that's who they also work with to do their lab or to do their fecal coliform. So we're going to continue as we have in the past, just taking our samples there. So we collect those staff-wise between Alex and I. We'll go out and collect the fecal coliform. So basically to help meet our MS4 side of things. So we'll get, I'm not sure which month we'll get it done in, but between now and before October, we'll get our 5 samples within the 30-day period as far as how the water quality standard for fecal coliform is set. So we'll have a number of sites that will go out and do that and just take the samples directly over to ETP Labs for analysis. So what I'm looking for is a motion to approve a work order not to exceed our budgeted amount of $850. I got Shane from Illinois American. And if I can get a second for that motion.
Second, Lockport.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Launch our last poll. Right, looks like we got everybody who was going to vote, and our motion carries again with no votes. Thank you very much. Okay, we're done with that part. So we're going to jump into our presentation with Tetra Tech. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to Hillary. So we've been working with Tetra Tech over kind of late winter into spring here on kind of the first couple of tasks here. And
are you seeing my presentation now?
yes, you're up.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for letting me jump in on the meeting today. Yeah, so I wanted to give a status update on where we are with the NARP development strategy. And oops, how do I advance? There we go. Great. So just a reminder of the timeline of the various tasks and where we are. I came and did a presentation here virtually for you all back in March, and we talked about the data inventory that we've been going through, kind of what the key parts and goals of the NARP strategy were going to be. And now we have been evaluating the need for water quality modeling, and that's where we are today. We've started looking into the data evaluation for the NARP, and then we're going to check back in at the end of the project to kind of share the overall strategy. And so as a reminder, these are some of just the key elements of the NARP that need to be considered as we go, and remembering that full spatial extent of the entire watershed there. So there's, going to be identifying those phosphorus sources. There needs to be an implementation strategy to improve water quality, and it needs to be science and data supported, stakeholder involvement, etc. So these are some of our key players that we're looking at. This graphic should look familiar from the last presentation as well. And then these are also the same graphics from the previous presentation as just kind of a reminder to us of, on the left, we have the flow balance at the downstream end of the lower Des Plaines, where we can see how much of that flow in that dark blue is coming from the sanitary and ship canal. And we've got it divided out there between Stickney and Calumet, and then kind of all else in the middle. We've got the fraction of our flow that comes from the upper Des Plaines at our headwaters, what is contributed by the main stem plants, Salt Creek, DuPage River, Willow Creek, which is mostly Keary, and then Hickory Creek down here. And then, so that's flow. And then looking at load of phosphorus that is being put into the waterways is a similar kind of breakdown between the various sources. So just keeping that in mind. And this is also a similar graphic as last time, looking at total phosphorus concentrations as you move downstream. So this is kind of putting us into the context of talking about why we would need to model and the decision that we're looking at, which is that yes, a model is going to be necessary, basically like a two kind of step model, if you think about it, using two different platforms. And part of the reason is because what we're doing with that source analysis that I was showing you is we're identifying, we know what our boundary conditions are, if you will. We know what's coming into the main stem, but we don't know you need a model to show kinetically how those loads are resulting in this graphic of what we're seeing in stream. So that's the purpose of a model like Qual2K, is to actually have that kinetic, those kinetic equations happening in stream or in the model, so we can show how we can predict what is happening now and what would happen in the future. And so thinking about the goals for meeting the NARP, we kind of identified that, the most complicated pieces of the puzzle here, or the most complicated, is going to be the target development for total phosphorus in the main stem. We already have a target that we're looking at for the tributaries based on the IPS tool and what was done, what's being done and written up as part of the DuPage salt work right now. So that's what's kind of taking care of the tributaries. So we're left with the main stem and what target development would look like there. And if you recall, or even if you don't know this, but the reason that we cannot use the same data set that we used for the tributaries is because those are considered wadeable streams and our main stem is non-wadeable. So it's kind of a different data set, kind of a different class of waterway. As you know, it's gigantic and complex. And so that is going to be a complicated step. And then also predicting the impacts of nutrient management opportunities. The top one, the target development, that is where we propose and believe that we need to use the IPS tool as our model to get us to a target. And then for the predicting nutrient management impacts, that's where we believe Qual2K modeling, receiving water modeling, is going to be appropriate to see what happens in stream. So in considering when to model, why to model, what are we doing? Of course, you need to consider like the financial considerations, what alternatives are there. And so Jennifer and our team, we've been having these conversations. We've been talking to MBI and DuPage Salt folks. We've been looking at the data requirements that would be needed to support a modeling effort. And it does matter what our neighbors are doing, like what is being done regionally, what do we think Illinois EPA is going to accept, and what are we going to feel comfortable with at the end of the day to really meet the NARP criteria as being scientifically defensible. And so this is sort of like the way we're kind of proposing moving forward at this time. So, and the way it would work is these two models that we're talking about, the IPS tool and Qual2K, those models, they would work in tandem.
Hillary?
So, yeah.
Just real quick. So when we're talking about the IPS tool here, it would be taking the IPS tool that was created for the wadeable streams and basically kind of updating it or using a different data set for large rivers to do the same things that model did for tributaries. So it's looking at a different data set, looking at large river data versus the wadeable streams data. So although it's the same model, it's being used in a different application in what you're talking about here. So I just want to make sure people were clear on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the reason that we can't use that existing data set is because it's all from wadeable streams. So then the question becomes, how can we populate a data set from non-wadeable streams, and what is that going to look like? And that's going to be part of, the kind of planning and thinking about next steps are, to the results of the IPS tool. This is a graphic that's associated with the DuPage salt work. Can you see my cursor moving? Jennifer?
Sorry, yes, I was muted.
Cool. So the idea being that you're collecting total phosphorus data, and you're also collecting data on fish and macroinvertebrates to find this kind of threshold where phosphorus sensitive species are able to thrive relative to what concentration of total phosphorus. So what you do is, Stephen sent me this graphic, McCracken, but what you're doing is you're identifying what that kind of threshold is, and that's how you develop the target. So to develop that target, what you do is you put all of the paired data, which we don't yet have, from the main stem. And then we may also need to talk about, and Jennifer, you can expand on this later if you want to. You don't really need to go there, but there may need to be data collection from other non-wadable streams that are in the vicinity, like the Kankakee, to then kind of populate this data set of non-wadable streams across a nutrient gradient, so you can get enough data points to find that kind of a threshold. So what we're talking about with this like new iteration of using the IPS tool for the main stem, that's about, you know, developing a target using non-wadable data sets, and that will require some new data collection. So then once the target is developed, oh, and what I was going to say here too is that this is basically an abridged version of what was done for the tributaries, because we're kind of focusing on the stressor response relationship of total phosphorus and phosphorus sensitive species. We're not necessarily going to need as much volume of data collection as was done previously. So that's what we're hoping for this newer evaluation that would be done by MBI folks.
Yeah, so really looking at kind of the nutrient related items versus like the original IPS started with about 200 different parameters that looked at. And so we would be really looking at a subset of those that are related to nutrient impairment.
Yeah, and the IPS tool and its interpretation is like, you know, a statistical method of looking at the data. And so once that target is developed, the reason that we would want to introduce a receiving water quality model like Qual2K is because then you could actually show a simulation of what's happening now, of what things look like in stream now based on the loading that's happening. And then we can run these various scenarios. So once you show that a model is calibrated to existing conditions, then you can start tweaking things and say, okay, what if the upper displanes set an in-stream target of, you know, 0.5, or what if we knew that improvements were going to be made, and that the target for the tributaries was going to be the 0.28. So what would a model look like where like we do nothing on the main stem, but this happens on our tributaries? What does that look like? So we can run kind of a suite of scenarios to kind of see what is possible, what is going to be impactful or not. And that will kind of speak to the ability for you guys to make the kind of statement to Illinois EPA about what you think your main stem plant effluent limits should be based on the results of that kind of a modeling application. And so I know that's probably a lot of information about modeling, but feel free to ask me any questions. But so yeah, next steps, we've written up a memo related to the first two tasks of the project. We've submitted those to Jennifer. So we're going to get some feedback from her, and then it's going to, I think those are going to be distributed out for review. We're drafting our task 3 memo based on the evaluation of whether or not modeling is going to be necessary and how. And then we've got our next two tasks, 4 and 5 are going to be related to data evaluation and then writing up that strategy. So that is a summary of where we're at right now.
If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask Hillary, or if you think of something later and you want to shoot me an email, we can work to get any questions answered. And the meeting that Hillary was referring to earlier, we had held a meeting specifically with the main stem dischargers and their consultants. So that's where kind of some of those other graphics and that were shown. And then the last meeting that we'll hold again will be with those specific dischargers. As you know, this really relates to what is going to end up eventually down the road in their permits. And so making sure that everybody's on board with how we're going to proceed with that. And yeah, I had just a couple comments for Hillary on those memos, and then we'll get those out to the membership once we get those finalized. Just so everybody can kind of keep up with. You don't have to remember all the stuff that Hillary just said. That's a lot.
And there's no
Anybody?
such thing as stupid questions.
Especially around modeling. I've been asking Hillary a lot of questions because this is definitely not my area of expertise, which is why we brought Tetra Tech on to kind of figure out what the best approach forward is. And there's definitely been a lot of discussion, like in the last meeting we had with the dischargers, of just, you know, making sure that what we put forward kind of fits with the complexity of the lower displays, and just the size and scale of the watershed at this point, as well as the kind of a very unusual tributary that we have coming from Chicago. Really is different than most of any of the other waterways that'll be turning in an ARP at the end of the year here. And so that has definitely added in a complexity to this whole process. All right, any questions for Hillary before we move on? Okay, well, thank you very much, Hillary, and we will follow up with next steps.
Okay, my
And I will
pleasure.
get-
Thanks for having me.
Yep, all right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. Yep. Okay, and again, as we go on, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask questions. We're going to move on to some stuff related to the chloride time limited quality standard for chloride. All of the information is available on the website, and so if you go to the lower displays page and click on our work, we have this page here for the chloride variants. Or now I think it actually says chloride TLWQS, but we have all of the templates that we have worked on, including templates for the final report or the annual report. And I think that Hannah actually just sent out to all of our petitioners what the final version of that was. It is posted to the website. I think some folks were using kind of the older version of it. So, you know, check your email for what Hannah just sent out. Just make sure you're using the right template. We put together this template, hopefully make it easier on you and your staff. And I know Hannah talked a lot about it at the last meeting. We do also have all the reports. So like everybody who submitted their PMPs, that's posted here. And then as we get the annual reports, they'll also be posted with your, you know, your organization. And that is one of the requirements for those reports is that they're posted publicly. And so we're able to do that through the website here, through the work group. So just some reminders, the first annual report for this past winter is due on July 1st. We have that template done and out there. We do have the last of the mentoring sessions for the annual report will be next week on June 1st. And I know Hannah has sent out information about these and kind of scheduling time slots. So I think she has like a Zoom window open for, I don't know, I think from 1 to 3 on the 1st, for you to kind of just join in and ask questions, or, you know, be able to share your screen and look at what you guys have put together. You can just contact Hannah to schedule a time slot, just so that, you know, she can focus on one at a time. We've been getting some really good questions from people. So this is, you know, definitely an opportunity if you're looking for any assistance with the annual report to let us know. And if you aren't getting to it until after the beginning of June here, always feel free to reach out to us for any questions. So again, if you are working with your consultant on this, please make sure that they're, aware of the template and they're using it. This annual report is for, your current operations and how you've been meeting or working towards the BMPs that are listed in your permit. I think that was it on the annual report. Yeah. So if you have any questions, let us know. And we want to make sure that everything gets submitted in the proper format to IEPA. I know we had a few issues with that with the PMPs, and so if you need any assistance in getting it into a PDF format to send to IEPA, let us know. And then we wanted copies of it in the original formats of Word and Excel, because then next year we'll have to put together a summary status report for the watershed. So that'll be compiling all of the information out of your annual reports. We do have this outreach opportunity for, well, ideally probably next winter. Now we have Joliet Library is signed up to take this for a couple of weeks in November, but it's an 8-panel set. It's both in English and Spanish. So they're two-sided, English on one side and Spanish on the other side. And it's really focused for residents. And so whether through your library or municipal center, we have these kind of to check out throughout the winter months or whenever would fit into a schedule for your library or your municipal center. You don't have to necessarily use all of them, so depending on the space you have, but they're pop-up, so they all come in a little carrying bags, really easy to get moved around. And then we also have like the little blue cups to go along with a display as well. So you can reach out to me about scheduling that or for more information. We do have our Winter Card Workshop dates available. Registration probably will open sometime in August, but they'll still be virtual again. That seems to definitely be the easiest way to get the most people there. So we'll be working again with Connie Fortin, now with Bolton and Mink for the public roads workshops. So starting in September, end of September into early October. And then this year, new for the parking lots and sidewalks, we have the new Illinois manual for parking lots and sidewalks and the Salt Smart certification program. And that's what we'll be hosting this year for parking lots and sidewalks. So still appropriate for municipal or park district staff that manage parking lots and sidewalks, but definitely geared towards private contractors. And so really making a push to get more private contractors involved in these types of practices. A couple other resources out there through Bolton and Mink. This is something Connie Fortin's been working on for a number of years up in Minnesota. They've been doing it virtually for the last 3 or 4 years now, but they have their SALT Symposium. It's a 2-day virtual event. They have their draft event agenda available. Like Hannah sent out an email, I think yesterday, to at least all the folks on the chloride committee. We'll get this posted somewhere on the website as well. Just letting people know about that. It's a nice resource. They kind of split their agenda, so there's a big focus on like winter salt use, but then they've also pulled in a number of resources on other sources of salt, like through fertilizer, dust suppression, water softening, things like that. So looking at best management practices and opportunities for making reductions in those areas. And then we're working with kind of in partnership with the kind of our local watershed groups here in the Salt Smart Collaborative to put together a Northeast Illinois Salt Conference. So we're looking for some point like mid to late September. There'll be an in-person, really geared towards supervisor management level, probably like a half-day type of workshop, and really hitting on up and coming or cutting edge. What are the next practices that are coming down the road? Figure this another just really good opportunity for networking and working on these issues. Mostly geared at that municipal roads kind of focus, I think is where we're at. So we're working on that. Hannah's taken the lead on that, but like I said, coordinating across our watershed groups here in Northeastern Illinois. So more information on that to come. A quick review of the spring outreach materials because they're still very relevant as we go into summer. So we had a lot of focus on water conservation, particularly as I know many of our communities are working around this issue with the change in drinking water source that's coming here in Will County. And so providing some outreach materials that municipalities, communities can share with their residents. So they're all available on that outreach page on the website. And then we have a whole series of things under water conservation. So between some blogs, we have a poster that was distributed as part of the meeting packet, and then a couple of articles that can be utilized. We added in the spring more about rainwater harvesting, bioswales, and kind of the green infrastructure series that we've been working on, adding more items to that. And this one ties directly in with your MS4 permits, as green infrastructure is one of the items that's specifically called out as far as having outreach materials for your residents. As we got in the summer, we started kind of realized we've been working on this for a long time and really don't have a whole lot of information about how wastewater treatment plants function and really the role they play in water quality in our local streams. So started what will likely be a series for wastewater treatment plants that we'll kind of keep building on over time. Again, adding to the green infrastructure series with green roofs, and on our watershed ecology side of things, talking about how we use macroinvertebrates to really look at stream health and some resources around that. So there's the poster I had mentioned, and this is, again, we kind of talk about this at all of our meetings about how we really do want to work with your communities, with our communities on how we can customize some of these materials, or if you have specific needs. And here's just an example of, a way that we can do that, of like adding the logo for your community onto this poster, and whether directing people, to your website or back to the LDP Watershed's website through a QR code. So these are, ways that we can customize materials. At our Lower DuPage meeting last week, we were talking about with that wastewater series, a lot of plants are getting back to doing tours. And so if there are materials that you might be looking for to use with your tours, we would love to work on whether it's updating. I know there's some old things out there that some of the plants have been using, some old handouts and that we'd be happy to work on updating or customizing. So lots of opportunities, but we love people to reach out and let us know kind of what your needs are. I was going to update this picture. We do have more current things on our Facebook posts at this point. I know Leah's been posting a lot of the green infrastructure posts. And I thought I had put a fresh one up here, but if you check out the Facebook page, we do have all the new materials on the Facebook page, and so the opportunity for you to like the posts or to share the posts through your own social media, through your communities, and you really using this as a way to kind of model how we can share this information. So any questions there? All of our meeting recordings are posted both on our Will County Watershed's YouTube page, and there's links from the work group section, the Lower Des Plaines section of the website. So we have our next meeting at the end of July. The the cause work, chloride work group will be holding their annual meeting on June 21st. And I know part of the discussion that they're going to be having on that agenda is looking at one of the, I think it's BMP 16 from the TLWQS permit on how different petitioners are addressing the BMP that talks about keeping stormwater, what to do with stormwater that's moving across your salt storage area. So there was, recommendations in that BMP to create berms to, be able to collect that water and then potentially utilize that water for like brine making or something like that. And definitely a BMP that many communities are struggling on because there's a lot of potential cost in that collection of whether it's wash water or stormwater moving across the site. And I know folks are part of that meeting is going to be some discussion on how different entities are looking at trying to tackle that one. Also be a good discussion if that's something that is also on kind of your list for your community as well. I believe that is all I had to share. And if you have any questions about any of the things that Hillary presented, any questions around your annual reports for TLWQS, anything around outreach materials, interests, new ideas that you have, things you're struggling with, please reach out to us. All right, does anybody have anything to add? Any questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you all for attending the meeting today, and I hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. Get a nice day off on Monday, and we will see you midsummer. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.